I'm Matthew Bellantoni, and I work with Aaron, and I'm really happy to be speaking to you now. It's been a series of events that have seemed to want to keep this from happening. I'm going to talk tonight a little bit about another part of our testing infrastructure, and I'm just wondering how many people actually are Rails people here, because all these discussions have been about Rails. Okay, so that's pretty good. So looks like a little bit more than half of the room knows what's been being spoken about for the first hour of the evening. So I'm going to talk about a little something I put together called isolated fixtures. We'll see how this works. And so what are isolated fixtures? Well, first, I guess I should talk about what fixtures are for the people who don't know. Basically, it's a facility that Rails gives you to provide a test harness, so a test set of data for your tests. And this is like Rails, there are certain conventions associated with it, and if you do the right things and name things the right things, everything automatically and automagically happens to you, and it's really good stuff. Except I found for a certain point for me that it kind of broke down at a certain point. And so that caused me to create these independent fixtures. So independent fixtures are basically, they allow you to have a separate set of this data for all of your tests at a granularity at which you decide. Fixtures by default provide a global data set for all your tests, which has some good properties as your application grows, but I found for me that it had some bad properties, which were that it started to take me a lot more time to create my tests, which was not a good thing, mostly because I was trying to figure out how to fit my test where I was trying to test a particular thing into this larger set of data without somehow breaking some number of other tests in a way that weren't immediately apparent and generally not actually that useful. That it wasn't that I was breaking code. I wasn't revealing bugs in our code. I was just revealing kind of some assumptions in the tests.
Just dependencies in our tests.
Yeah, dependencies in our test, which are the data part of it, the fixture part of it is completely undocumented. So as it gets larger, and we do a fair amount of testing, it becomes kind of mysterious what intent was, why somebody named something, why are these 5 things fully specified, but these 3 records only have 2 of the fields in the object specified, and it just became a disaster. And so for about a month, I said to myself, I need this, I need this, I need this. I Googled around for it, and then finally I said, no, I won't write it. So why do you care about this? So I spoke about this a little bit. Now, you can create fixtures easier and more quickly without breaking your existing tests and spending 2 hours trying to spend 2 hours finding some mistake that's just silly. And later, they're easier to understand. It's much more simple, for example, when you're writing unit tests, to go to a directory where there are now just 2 files for, say it's your user's unit test. Now there's just a couple files in a directory. They're both, I don't know, 10 pages long, or they're both, they're 10 records long, or something like that, something you can get your head around. When you go back and look at the test, you can figure out what's going on in a Railsy kind of way where there's just some sort of convention at work. And also when you're writing other tests, you can fill in the 3 fields for a particular object that are relevant for that test. Say when you've got multiple objects involved in a testing scenario, the sort of ancillary objects, you can just provide the timestamp that you really care about, for example. So I'll just talk a little bit about the mechanics. The way we put this together is you take the code, which I'll talk about in a minute. We throw it in, actually, we have a test helper directory in our test, in the directory hierarchy. We need to include it from test helper. I just write this idiomatic way to require it because it turns out that require just doesn't work, and boy, that was a pain. To use it, you use it in a manner very similar to just regular fixtures, but instead of saying fixtures, you say isolated fixtures. I suppose I could have overridden just fixtures and had you pass an additional argument to that, but that only occurred to me later. And then, as I alluded to earlier, so what will happen, so say I have a user analytics test in a typical Rails fashion, we'll take this name and then just convert it into a lowercase underscore version of it, and now those tests will expect to find the fixtures down in that directory. You can get the code off of our blog, or if you can't find it there, and believe me, you'll find it there, you can email me and I'd be happy to send it to you. So some notes and issues about this. We're on Rails 1.16 right now. We haven't moved up to 1.2, so I don't know if it works on 1.2. 1.2 may have solved this problem, but I don't think it has. I Googled around a little bit when it got released, and I didn't see anything about that. It sort of kind of violates do not repeat yourself, because now you are in fact going to be repeating yourself a little bit. I think one of the notions about fixtures is as you write all these tests and you get this growing body of data, you now, when you want to write additional tests, have kind of a bunch of data you can already use. So I'll use the example of a user again, where we have users in our system, and almost every test wants 3 or 4 users to exist to have a test go in a meaningful way, or a functional test, that is. Now you have to repeat some user code, but for me, the trade-off is worth it. That I'm able to get through tests quicker, able to understand them. I'm able to understand them later when I come back when something breaks. When you look at the code, you're either going to be just amazed by my skill at Ruby, because I rename a lot of things, or you might just say, "My God, what is this?" I leave it up to you. It works. It's pretty on the outside, and it's valuable to me, and I hope it's valuable to other people. That's all I've got, unless you've got some questions, or easy questions, or pleasant comments.
Do isolated fixtures, do they play nice with normal fixtures? Can you use both?
Yes. In fact, the major balance of the majority of our tests are actually still using the old fixtures. We didn't go and rewrite all of our tests when we added these, so they play along just fine.
Can you create sets of fixtures rather than fixtures that depend on, basically that are within a subdirectory that corresponds to the test string?
They're just driven right off the test right now, and that works well for us so far. I could definitely see how you would want maybe to find
like a performance data set versus
something like that. No, we haven't. I've not done that.
You might be happy to know that there was someone with a similar tech, the new DB unit for Java, and together with Hibernate followed a similar tactic where you name methods and unit tests the data fixtures for that test appropriately, and it'll load those data sets on Mac for you. So
okay,
maybe you're on the right track.
Great.
Someone else had a similar idea in Java.
With positive feedback. Yeah.
As long as I'm thinking about fixtures, this isn't directly related, but the thing that still kills me on fixtures, that slows me down the most in traditional fixtures, is the referencing of so many numerical IDs when doing join table fixture models, RESTful Rails. And I know there's kind of a fixtures references plugin out there that isn't getting a lot of action. Have you or anybody else come up with something that you really love for referencing by name other fixtures? Or?
No, but I mean, that's actually part of the motivation for this is, when I'm talking about the test set getting really, really larger, having to go through and build these joins and have 4 files up simultaneously and trying to track the IDs through, it's just a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And when you can get that all, I use Emacs, so when you can get it into Emacs and cut the buffer in half, cut the screen in half and look at 2 of them and say, okay, yeah, I know what's going, I know what's going on here. So now it just simplifies everything. Again, at the cost of having to repeat a little bit of stuff, but I'm okay with that.
Anyone else?
Well, I feel like I would get a lot of use out of isolated fixtures if I could think of them almost as like particular context that I could reuse. Like I'd like maybe use these fixtures for in 3 different controllers, but maybe for only like a couple tests in each controller. Like, would the syntax have to be expanded to handle that sort of thing?
So you mean, so you're talking about doing it on scoping out on a controller basis, or you're talking about doing it like on an action basis?
Or an arbitrary basis, really. Like, if I want to include the same 3 isolated fixtures in 3 out of my 8 controllers.
Yeah.
You know, but like, it seems like it'll just, right now it's scoped to only 1 controller, because
Yeah.
it makes an assumption by name.
So it makes that assumption. We haven't had the need to do what you're asking. I think that's what the gentleman in the back was also asking for. I think if we were starting from scratch, we'd be much more interested in doing that, or if we had gotten, or if a greater portion of our fixtures were these isolated fixtures, I'm sure we'd find ourselves saying we want to do that kind of thing. Can it be done? I have no doubt. You know, it's just kind of somebody who wants to take 4 or 5 hours and hacking up Rails to see what actually you need to futz with to make everything go.
Well, first of all, we've been having this argument, in our office about how broken fixtures are for forever, and none of us came up with the idea of like granulated fixture scenario. So first of all, I think it's an excellent idea. But the immediate thing that we thought of, our solution was just abandon fixtures. Like, well, several of us are just not using fixtures in any test. For some of us, that's meant like actually creating objects in the setups for specific tests, and we sort of like have an evolved way of doing that. And then some of us are doing mocking to the extreme, where actually you don't even have any objects in your database. You just mock them all. But the problem with that is you do want to test the state of your application, and combined with what Eric was just saying, like what I want to go back and try right now is what you're doing with integration tests, where you have fixtures named in scenarios named after integration tests, like user stories, where like for this particular user story, there's this set of fixtures, and it would automatically recognize it based on the name of integration test, which would really complement a fixture-less like unit test strategy for the rest of the test suite.
Well, I mean, this should work with integration tests.
Does it?
We're not using it on integration tests right now, but it, I believe it should work with integration tests. I can't think of a reason why it would not.
That would be cool.
Famous last words. But
Does it assume there's controller in the name of the class, though?
it just looks at the name. It just looks at the name of the class, of the test class, and then just breaks it down from there. But I'm trying to think if it depends on test unit, and I'm trying to think right now, does it depend on test unit, and does test unit get used in integration tests, or integration tests depends on something else fundamental?
If you just modify the active directory fixtures, it should work wherever, except for the names.
Okay, then it should.
So follow up on my question, the great thing about a user group is that by the time I finished asking it, 2 suggestions were shown to me. One is the fixture references plugin that I knew about, which is a bit awkward, and then another possibility to check out is the awesome fixtures hack, which has been pluginized by the Caboose team. I gather, so I haven't played with it yet, but it looks like it does something along the lines of what you might want to clean up the references.
Okay, well, that would be what it's called, the
Awesome fixtures.
awesome
So
fixture.
we need to write our own wicked awesome fiction.
Okay, well, thanks for your attention.